Hey y'all, welcome to My Life His Way. I am so excited for you all to join us here. Those of you who are new listeners, welcome. And those of you who are returning listeners, hey. I know I've been gone for a minute, but I'm so excited to share with you all this new segment that we're going to be doing on our podcast, and it's called Because of. And Because of is where we talk about modern situations that are a direct result of something ancient. Now, today's topic is called Because of Eve's Sin. Now, buckle up and let's go on this roller coaster ride. Okay, so because of Eve's sin, there are so many different things we can talk about in regards to this. But I want to start off with a reading from this amazing book called Patriarchs and Prophets. And this is from we're going to be reading parts from chapters 2 and 3. So the creation and the temptation and fall. So those are chapters 2 and 3. So we all know that God created Adam first and that Adam was lonely, right? So he created him a companion. So it says, God himself gave Adam a companion and he provided an helpmeet for him, a helper corresponding to him, one who was fitted to be his companion and who could be one with him in love and sympathy. Eve was created from a rib taken from the side of Adam, signifying that she was not to control him as the head, nor to be trampled under his feet as an inferior, but to stand by his side as an equal, to be loved and protected by him. So initially, Eve, woman, was created to provide companionship for man, for Adam, to be a helper, a helpmeet, to someone to be there for him who was perfectly made specifically for this reason, right? She was his equal. He wasn't to trample upon her, belittle her, none of these things. Like that wasn't it at all. So she was his second self, showing the close union and the affectionate attachment that should exist in this relation. Okay, how cool is that? So she was his second self, like how we say our other halves when we're married. Your husband is your other half or your better half, your wife is your better half. However you say it, we all know the saying, right? So Ellen White goes on to talk about it was one of the first gifts of God to man, and it was one of the two institutions after the fall Adam brought with him beyond the gates of paradise. Okay, so this was talking about marriage. God celebrated the first marriage. So it says, thus the institution has for its originator the creator of the universe. Marriage is honorable. So it was one of the first gifts that God gave to man was the institution of marriage between Adam and Eve, man and wife, right? And it's one of the institutions that Adam took out of the Garden of Eden with him, because we know Eden was a physical place and they were in the garden that was in Eden. Okay. So it says, when the divine principles are recognized and obeyed in this relation, marriage is a blessing. It guards the purity and happiness of the race, and it provides for man's social needs. It elevates the physical, the intellectual, and moral nature. So, marriage is much more than just having someone to cuddle with or to talk to. It's a healthy relationship. It should be a healthy relationship. It says for social skills, it helps the physical and the intellectual and the moral nature. So, all of these things marriage was good for. Okay, so what's bringing up this thought for me was while I was reading this a little further over into the book Patriarchs and Prophets, there was a section that spoke about directly about the change of the roles after sin. So, a lot of people like to talk about that, right? After the Old Testament, we have the New Testament. In the New Testament, there's a new covenant, a new set of rules and laws and all these different things. But what I think people forget is that we had these before the 10 commandments, when it was just Adam and Eve here, right? So it says the law of God is as sacred as God himself. It is a revelation of his will, a transcript of his character, the expression of divine love and wisdom. So it wasn't something that was to be like arbitrary, something, oh, God is giving us all these rules to follow, he hates us. He's doing all this to make our lives difficult. No, he did this because he loves us, right? But he still gave us the freedom of choice. Thus, we have the fall, right? So we know the story of Eve being tempted by the beautiful, beautiful serpent that could talk, and it had wings, and it looked different from anything that she had ever seen before. And she broke a rule first before she even took a bite of the fruit. She left Adam's side where she was to stay at all times because God knew the serpent was there, right? He had allowed that. So after Adam realizes that this is what happened, she comes to give him the fruit. It says Adam understood that his companion had transgressed the command of God. And he mourned that he had permitted Eve to wander from his side. They were distracted by the things around them, right? He didn't realize she had walked away and she decided to walk away. Says Adam, he mourned that he had permitted Eve to wander from his side. But now the deed was done. He must be separated from her whose society had been his joy. How could he how could he have it thus? So love, gratitude, loyalty to the creator, all were overborne by love to Eve. She was a part of himself, and he could not endure the thought of separation. And this is the part that gets me. He did not realize that the same infinite power who had from the dust, right? Who had from the dust of the earth created him a living, beautiful form and had in love given him a companion could supply her place. So Adam was so blinded with his love for Eve that he didn't even stop to think to realize that God could have created him someone else, made perfectly for him as well. He could have done it. He would have done it because man was not meant to be alone, right? So he resolved to share her fate. If she must die, he would die with her. So Adam was literally the first ride or die, right? So this this next section, so we go through them making clothes for themselves because now they're naked. They now feel shame, things that they never felt before, never knew about themselves before, they're now feeling because they've eaten the fruit, right? So God lets Satan know that he'll put enmity between him and the woman and between his seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head and thou shalt bruise his heel. And then we come to what God told Eve in Genesis verse 3 or chapter 3 verse 16. It says, "Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." Okay, so Eve was told of the sorrow and the pain that must henceforth be her portion. So this was now going to be her life. She wasn't supposed to go through any of these pains, and she wasn't supposed to um, be under her husband, right? He wasn't supposed to rule over her. They were supposed to be equal. So these two were supposed to be equal, but because of her sin, that was no longer the case. Adam was now made the head of their households, their family, their relationship. Okay. In the creation, she says, God had made her equal of Adam. Had they remained obedient to God in harmony with his great law of love, they would ever have been in harmony with each other. But sin had brought discord, and now their union could be maintained and harmony preserved only by submission on the part of the one or the other. Eve had been the first in transgression, and she had fallen into temptation by separating from her companion, contrary to the divine direction. It was by her solicitation that Adam sinned, and she was now placed in subjection to her husband. Eve had been perfectly happy by her husband's side in her Eden home, but like restless modern Eves, she was flattered with the hope of entering a higher sphere than which God had assigned her. In attempting to rise above her original position, she fell far below it. A similar result will be reached by all who are unwilling to take up cheerfully their life duties in accordance with God's plan. In their efforts to reach positions for which He has not fitted them, many are leaving vacant the place where they might be a blessing. In their desire for a higher sphere, many have sacrificed true womanly dignity and nobility of character and have left undone the very work that heaven appointed them. So I was reading this or listening to it, and instantly in my mind, the thought, oh snap, because of Eve's sin, all these different things that women have been fighting for centuries do not work. Things like feminism, it doesn't work. Gender equality, it doesn't work. Because, especially as Christian women, if we realized this story, right, we would understand that we lost the right to be equal to man, whether it's at work or at home, in any social situation. We're no longer given that privilege. We lost that privilege and that right when Eve sinned. So, the gender roles, women sometimes want to be on top, ahead of everything, right? But it doesn't work because God no longer gave her that position, right? So, if you're trying to be in a relationship and want to be the one making all the decisions and not letting your husband make any of the decisions, that's not how God designed it. He designed for us to be equal, right? But once sin happened, we were no longer given that privilege to be equal to our husbands. So all these things are fine and dandy, right? To be able to be treated nicely by in the workforce, in public situations, in any kind of situation, right? But we, as especially Christian women, need to realize that we don't get to play that part anymore. So we are no longer equal to man or to our husbands, okay, or to any man, because we forfeited that right when we sinned, when Eve sinned. So there are roles now placed. So the man is the head of the household, the head of the family, but the mom, the woman, she has the maintaining of the family, right? In the home. She is to make sure everyone is happy, like the Proverbs 31 woman that we talked about earlier. That is the new that should be the new normal. That is the new rule. Yes, we can work, we can do all these things, but if we neglect the home, yeah, no, it doesn't work. So I was talking to my friend about this, and I was shook. She was shook. Took her a couple days to digest it, but this is what we came up with. When two people come together, they become a whole. But when we're doing math, the sum of a problem does not always come from two equal numbers. You can have 4 plus 7, you get 11, right? 4 plus 7 is 11. And that together is a whole number. You see? So you have two numbers, you add them together, and it equals a whole, right? So the goal of a relationship is to have a complete unit, a family, a whole number. Because when you have two sums, they do not need to be equal. But that doesn't mean someone is higher or lower than the other. It just means they are on two different planes. Okay, so equality does not always mean you're on the same level. And you have to make sure that you are taking responsibility for the gifts and talents that God has given to you. You have to take these things seriously because God has put you, ladies, in this position to rear up the next generation. If you're a mom or if you're planning to be a mom, we have to remember that we are put in this position to bear children and to raise up children because we are their first teachers. We get this sacred opportunity to train up these children, right? So women's work is just as important as men's work. We can't do everything they can, and they can't do anything or everything we can do either. They can't bear children, but we can, right? We are given this huge, huge role and position. Without us, there would be no them, right? So the point of all of this is because of Eve's sin, we can't be equal. We can't have gender equality. Feminism does not work in the realm of Christianity. But we have to remember that even though this is a result of sin, we still have important roles to play, right? So remember that you are a whole person. Be whole by yourself, right? And be whole with your person. But when you're by yourself, even when you have your person, your husband or your wife, you still need to be whole when you're alone with God. Don't fight to be equal. Don't fight to be someone else. Okay? Because the sum of your problem is a whole number with God.